All right, good morning and welcome back. Today we're going to work on Chapter 12, Chapter 12, Section 1, Politics of the People. All right, the election of 1824. In 1824, regional differences led to a fierce fight over the presidency. You're going to start seeing this kind of old guard, these guys who are kind of wealthy, people that are almost born into the society which gets them into the government. You're going to start to see kind of a change in that. John Quincy Adams, you probably heard that name before. This is John Adams' son. William Crawford, Henry Clay, and Andrew Jackson all ran for president. And although Jackson won the popular vote, he did not win a majority in the electoral. So the House of Representatives chose John Quincy Adams to be their president. See, if you don't, and still to this day, if you don't have a majority in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives gets to choose the president. Now, Clay threw his support to Adams, who then made Clay his Secretary of State. And this is a huge move that really upsets Jackson because at that time, being the Secretary of State was kind of a stepping stone to becoming the president. So Jackson's followers said the election was corrupt and an aura of corruption followed him throughout his presidency. John Quincy Adams' presidency could have been something that was really, really good. He had a lot of really good ideas, but unfortunately, Andrew Jackson had such a vendetta against him that he did everything in his power to assure that John Quincy Adams never really accomplished anything of greatness, and therefore you saw a lot of issues throughout his presidency. Now, Jackson felt that the 1824 election had been stolen from him and that the will of the people had been ignored, so he immediately set out to prepare for the election of 1828. Right from the get-go, the whole 4 years of John Quincy Adams' presidency, Andrew Jackson is working because he plans on running again in 1828. Jackson claimed to represent the common man, and out of this became the split of two parties. Jackson represented the Democrats, while the National Republicans came from Adams' group. The idea of spreading political power to all the people and ensuring majority rule became known as Jacksonian democracy. And Jacksonian democracy is that move. You had Jeffersonian democracy, and then which was kind of like power to the people, but Jacksonian democracy is even more so power to the people because, even in Jefferson's time, power to the people was more power to the wealthy, educated individuals. This is now more of a move to the people in general and the majority of people, even those who are not educated. Now, with the expansion of voting rights to all adult white males, Jackson won an overwhelming victory in 1828, and this vote put an end to the idea that the government should be controlled by the educated elite. So now what you see is you're starting to see this idea that everybody can be involved in politics and everybody can vote and anybody can become the president. And Jackson is the first president to really prove that. Now, the people's president. Jackson's rise to the presidency was seen as a true American success story, for he was the first president from a humble background and from the West. First of all, he wasn't from the West originally. He was from Virginia. He was actually... he was born into a family that wasn't really bad off, but his father died when he was very young, and that really put the family in a hole. Jackson had a rough life. His father died at a young age. He joined the militia to fight in the Revolution when he was only 13 years old, and where he and his brother were captured and held prisoners. So Jackson and his older brother, who was a couple years older than him, had joined the army, but since they were so young, they were actually just couriers, and they would carry information back and forth, and they were captured by the British. Well, while they were captured by the British, they both actually came down with smallpox. His brother died of smallpox, and his mother died shortly after. So what happens then is his mother comes, and she negotiates to free the two boys. His brother dies. She's able to nurse Andrew back to health, but then she contracts the smallpox and she dies. So by the time he's 14, 15 years old, he's on his own. He has nobody to help him. Also, while he was held captive, one of the commanding officers, British officers, actually tried to force him to shine his boots. He refused to do it, so he hit him across the face with his saber, and he ended up having a scar his whole entire life. And all of these things created this deep hatred inside him towards the British, which we'll see come out of him later on, or we saw come out of him when he was in the War of 1812. He then moved to Tennessee and studied law. He bought a plantation, became a congressman. So this is where they get the Westerner, because he moved to Tennessee. He became a general during the War of 1812. We talked about that, where he gained fame from the Battle of New Orleans and earned the name Old Hickory because one of his soldiers said he was tough as hickory. You know, his soldiers thought highly of him too, because he really did care about his soldiers, and he was, very good to them. But he was a very ferocious person in combat, and just in life in general, he was not the kind of person that you wanted to cross. Now, Jackson takes office. Jackson's success in the presidential election of 1828 came at a high price. Shortly after he won, his wife Rachel died of a heart attack. This is Rachel. Now, this was one of those things that was really a big issue back at the time. Rachel was actually married to another man. He had left her, but they never really got a divorce, and then she was married to Jackson, so there was always like all kinds of talk about that. It was really an issue at that time. Jackson was the kind of person who, like I said, he didn't want to mess them. He'd been in a couple duels. He had killed a couple men in duels, and I mean, he was a very rough and tumble kind of guy. Jackson looked thin, pale, and sad at his inauguration on March 4th, 1829. The Capitol was full of enjoyment, and thousands of people showed up. In fact, after he did his inaugural address, he went to the White House to basically have his meal. All these people came, and they stormed the house. He actually had to flee the house for his own safety. They then stormed the house, drank all the wine, ate all the food, swung from the chandeliers, and basically kind of trashed the place, and then they just left and went home. Now, a new political era begins. So this is kind of the things that Jackson is going to do. He's going to be involved in three major things in history. Two, he's going to get completely wrong. One, he's going to get right. Jackson promised to reform government and started by replacing many government officials with his supporters, which is known as the spoils system. The spoils system is a horrible system because a lot of times the people that end up being allowed into office are not people who are trained for this, and they're not very good. President Jackson would face three major issues: the status of Native Americans, the rights of the states, and the role of the Bank of the U.S. Like I said, he'll get two of them right, he'll get one of them wrong. He'll get two of them wrong and one of them right. And those two are both catastrophic to groups of people and to the United States in general. Now, that's it for Chapter 12, Section 1. If you got any questions, get a hold of me. Make sure you're doing the readings and getting the work done. Have a great day.